Hi, and welcome back to this tutorial series about pixel streaming. My name is William Orving, and I work for Epic Games as a technical artist. In the last tutorial, we went through how to create a HTML slider that sent a value to Unreal and later changed the yaw input of the camera. In this tutorial, I want to do the other way around and send back a camera yaw input to the using websites of the pixel streaming application and change the slider as well as the value down here. Let's get started with this. Let's start off in Unreal Engine, under the Blueprint controller. What you might have remembered from before, we got a JSON string value called a descriptor from the website, and that later changed the application here in Unreal. Now, what we want to do now is use something similar from the Pixel Streamer input component as well. So let's drag that out. I'll then drag from this and type send instead. Then you will notice that a send pixel streaming response node will be available for you. So this sends a JSON string value instead of receiving it, like this one. So what can we do with this? We can just connect this to anything, but let's do something simple to start off with. You might have remembered before that I just reset the camera by pressing 1, so let's do that again. When I press 1, I set the control rotation, split that up to 0 so it resets, and then after it is reset, it can send a value back to the website to know that it is reset. So just connect that and make a descriptor string value. In this case, we can just say reset camera. What we have to do now is in the JavaScript document, this must be received and change the slider value and the text value. So let's do that next. Now back on the website, it is important to add a add response event listener to your JavaScript document if you want to be able to receive or send responses from Unreal to the website. If you're using the Pixel Streaming example project, or the Pixel Streaming example website at least, you'll notice that this is added, or a listener is added, at the end of the onParagon load function that is called whenever the website is loaded. In this case, it just changes, the function is up here. If the substring is 1080, it changes or it disables the 4K button. This one right here. So we will be going into this whenever we press 1. But what we want to do is we want to check if the data value is reset camera, like we said before. So what we can start off with is just comment away this so it doesn't get in the way. And then we can make another if check. So if the data is equal to a string value that is called reset camera, then it should enter this check here. So we can do something really simple here, just make it add something to the console log. Let's just make it add resetting camera. And then you can just save this, reload the website, and whenever we press 1 now, you'll notice that it says resetting camera. But this doesn't change the range value or the slider value or the text value. You might remember the time when we changed this value whenever we changed the or interacted with the HTML slider, we can do something similar here. So in that case, we used the document dot get element by ID and just looked for the name of that, or the ID of that, which is, I think we called it demo. And then we can change the inner HTML like we did before. In this case, I think the resetted value should be here at 1. So let's make it 1. Let's do the same with the slider. Get element by ID. I think we called it my range with a small m. And because this is a slider, it has a value and set that to 1 as well. And save that. Whenever we reload this website now and press 1, let's clear the console. It should say resetting camera, as well as set both this value, the text and the slider, to 1. In the next step, we would really just like to get the jaw value all the time whenever we touch this or whenever we change the camera rotation. Let's go back to Unreal and set that up first. Now back in Unreal, we want to be able to send the jaw input of the camera or the controller instead of just a reset camera string value. We can send multiple values or multiple variables as well by using a JSON code instead of just a simple string value here. So let's try that out. It looks something like this. We start off with a curly bracket, and then we have a string value, and let's call that variable slider name, for example. And the value should be camera slider, for example. And then we want slider value. So this is a variable that has the value of, let's say, 10. So what we can see here is it's hard to change this value in runtime because this is just a string value here. So what I tend to do is just use a append node for a string. So it's easier to split these up. So what we can do is just write the same thing as here, just split them up, like curly bracket and quote. Here we have the slider name value or the variable. Add a quote or camera. Oh, let's have that down here. So we might see that this is the same. Let me just double check this. So curly bracket, double quote, and the slider name variable, and the value of the slider name variable, the slider value variable, and then we want to join it here. So in this case, we can just get control rotation, for example, and get the yaw and convert it into a string and have that sent instead. So let's make a function out of this and connect it whenever we change the yaw input. If you're using the Pixel Streaming example project, you'll notice that the yaw input or the control rotation isn't handled in the controller. It's handled in the Orbit pawn. So let's open that up. And down here we have input axis lookup. Let's see, it should be this input axis turn when the mouse is down. So this is called, or this is working whenever we press the button down or touch the camera. And then it adds a controller yaw input. So what we would like to do is send the response from here, but because we already set it up in the Orbit controller, we can just create a custom function here and call it change yaw input. Or maybe something like send controller yaw input. Might be better. And connect that. Now I also noticed that this will obviously be a 1 to 360, and because the slider is still 1 to 100, we can use the map range clamp that we used before, just the other way around, from 1 to 360 and convert it into 1 to 100 and set that in instead. And then back to the Orbit pawn, we can just call on that here whenever we change or add controller yaw input to the camera. So to do that, we can just cast the controller, and in this case it's called BP underscore orbit underscore controller, and get player controller, it should be, and look for the send controller yaw input function that we created. If we double click this now, you'll notice that we were brought back here. So now that we have this set up, we can get these values or these variables and the values on them in the JavaScript document on the website. Let's do that next. Now back again to the website, I see that we can use something similar like we did for seeing the substring of data. So let's do a if, but in this case we know that we have a value that is camera slider. So what this does is that it will look in the data value, and if that has a substring that has a value camera slider, then it will enter here. So to split the JSON script or the JSON coding that we sent before from Unreal, we need to use something called a JSON parse. So let's start off with creating a JSON or just a variable, a constant variable called, let's say, JSON value. And how to JSON parse is by just typing JSON dot parse. Then have the data in there. And now this value here is a split up version of this data here. So to get the values that we wrote before, we can just create other variables. Let's create a variable called slider name. That is the JSON value dot slider name, and create another one called slider value. That is the JSON value dot slider value. So if I have written this correctly, this is the data value, or the list really of JSON data that we got, or that we sent from Unreal. This is the slider name, and this is the slider value. Now, like we did before, an easy way to see if this works is just by adding a console log and make it say slider name is. We can just add the slider name then, and then make another string that is slider value. Let's have a space here as well, and add a slider value. Now in the console log, if we save this, reload the website, and just open this up, let's see. Now, if I change this, we get a message down here, which is slider name, and that is camera slider, and then it is slider value, which is a float value now, which is okay. What we can do is actually just add a double quote again here, just to create a space between them. Something like that, just to see it more clearly. Slider name, camera slider, slider value, 89.92 something. Now, the only thing we really need to do now is do the exact same thing as we did here. So we can copy this, get the element by IDs, and instead of just setting that to a static value like this, we can just set both of these to slider value. And that should work as intended. Now you notice that the slider is changed and the value is changed as well. Now what we could do, either in Unreal or here, we could just floor this value to an int, but it really doesn't matter. Now when we have this set up, you'll notice that whenever I interact with the application on a website or through a website, it changes all the other users as well. So all the users that are looking on this website, if it's on Google Chrome on the PC or on a phone, it changes the slider value for everyone. So I can touch the application here on my phone, or just change the camera rotation here in Chrome. So in the next tutorial, I'm thinking about learning you how to set up this kind of application on a cloud service such as Google Cloud, AWS, or Azure. So see you then.